So welcome everybody, and thank you for being here today, especially under these bad air conditions. So really thank you. For those of you whom I've not yet met, I'm John Matsui from the Biology Scholars Program, situated in the Department of Integrative Biology. And I recognize a lot of faces out there, and I see some new faces. So thank you all for being here today. I wanted to make sure that today was a time when you can have many of your questions answered, but not just questions answered, but also for you to contribute your expertise and experience to the conversation around advising. A very important function that oftentimes I don't think is really addressed enough. We talk about teaching and we give teaching awards, but what about advising awards? What about the recognition that many of you should be getting because you are truly helping students realize success and realize their dreams and hopes, etc. And so I think advising is one of those things that the institution needs to acknowledge the importance of much more. And so that's the reason why I want to share with you some 26 years worth of lessons about advising students in the Biology Scholars Program. And here's how we're going to proceed. I'm going to talk with you at first about the major talking points for today, so that you'll have a sense of the map where we're going, but also that you'll have a chance to formulate some questions. I'm only going to be spending about 20 minutes doing this whole introduction. I'm going to give you a brief overview of the Biology Scholars Program, and then talk a little bit about our stance around student success and underrepresentation in STEM. This will be followed by a student panel. I've asked 3 BSP members to come and speak briefly to you to give us all advice. And then there'll be a discussion. And here's the opportunity for you to have your questions answered and share your expertise. So the first 4 bullets, that's going to occur in the first hour. And at 1 o'clock, we're going to shift into the conversational piece. So in terms of the talking points, number 1, we're going to talk about BSP's stance around student success and underrepresentation. Secondly, and this is a term that Dr. Missy Soto, who's the Deputy Director of BSP, she and I were having a conversation yesterday about how BSP advises. And we came up with this model or this description of inverted advising. You'll see what I mean by that. Then we'll talk about external constraints, because we live in the real world where it isn't an ideal situation, where there are many constraints on what we do as advisors. Then we'll have a student panel. And for all of this, I want you to jot down your questions. I want you to accumulate those questions so that we can go through those questions together and not get stuck on one question early on and not have a chance to finish the rest. And so the first hour, we're going to go through those first 4. And then in the second hour, we're going to actually have a conversation around your questions. So the Biology Scholars Program. BSP receives its funding from the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, as well as a portion of its funding from UC Berkeley. Secondly, the goal of BSP is to enlarge and diversify the pool of students that succeed in biology majors and related careers. And that's an important point. Enlarge and diversify, not just skim students who are already on their way to success. We're looking for talent possibly where nobody else is looking for talent. And we find that talent and we develop it. In terms of members, there have been over 3,500 BSP members over the last 26 years. About 3,100 have graduated. And here's the composition. 60% underrepresented ethnic minorities, 70% women, and 80% first to college and low-income students. A really unusual profile, a really unusual demographic for a population in STEM. In terms of success, comparing BSP underrepresented minority students with non-BSP majority students, our students enter Berkeley less well prepared to succeed. I'm not talking about ability, I'm talking about preparation. They come in with lower SATs and high school GPAs, yet they graduate with biology majors in approximately the same percentage as biology majors at large, and with nearly equivalent exit GPAs. And so whereas the preparation expectation gap is big at the outset, that gap closes and students succeed. And these slides will be made available on the BSP website, okay? In terms of the demographic of these students, I'm going to thank Andrew Epic for crunching these numbers. Here's an analysis of the 2002 to 2008 freshman cohorts of intended biology majors. And in the dark blue are the BSP participants, those whom we've selected for membership. And in the light blue, these are biology majors or intended biology majors at large. So if we take a look at how we've oversampled regarding particular characteristics of our members, we have more than what's represented in the pool of women. We have more underrepresented minorities than the pool. We have more first-generation college goers. And this API rank, the API index goes from 1 to 10. 1 being the lowest in terms of how well resourced the high school is, and 10 being the highest resourced high schools. And so about 52% of our students come from the lowest resourced high schools. In terms of weighted GPA, we oversample for students on the lower end of the spectrum. Berkeley students are just, out of this world in terms of their accomplishments in high school, as well as lower math SAT scores. And so we're choosing students by all the standard predictors. You wouldn't predict that they would succeed in STEM at Berkeley. In terms of program components, it's the usual list. And we have mentoring, paid research opportunities, we have tutoring, we have career development, and all these other things. And we're going to be focusing on the academic advising and personal counseling aspect today. In terms of our stance, BSP's stance regarding student success and underrepresentation, you're going to see some comparisons. BSP stance versus maybe an alternative stance to why students succeed, to the dilemma of underrepresentation. First of all, we take a talent development approach versus a talent search approach. We're looking for underexpressed talent, undervalued talent in STEM. And so as you saw with the scores and the high school GPA, we're not using GPAs and test scores as a threshold for admission. We're looking for talent that has the potential to be expressed given the right environment. Secondly, we look at achievement versus aptitude. Aptitude, in many people's minds, is this fixed entity. That is to say, a person at birth has an aptitude to do X. Instead, we look at achievement, and we look at achievement within the context of opportunity and access. What opportunities, what sorts of access did they have, these students have, to succeed in STEM? Did they have research experience opportunities? Did they have family members who had gone to college before, et cetera, et cetera? We take a growth mindset. That is to say, we assume that given the right environment, students can learn how to be successful, that there's a plasticity, that students can actually respond to the right types of supports, the right types of messages about their ability, and so on. And of course, a lot of hard work and effort on their part. But this is the growth mindset, as compared to this notion that there's this fixed ability coming in and that ability remains unchanged no matter what happens. We take a strength-based versus a deficit-based approach. And by that, I mean we don't concentrate on what students don't have. Instead, we look at what they bring, and we value what they bring. We help students understand that what got them here in spite of all the challenges they may have faced and the barriers, those abilities, those characteristics are applicable within this context. And we build on those strengths. And so, related to this is the notion of starting point and distance traveled. We frame the challenges in this way. Students who come to Berkeley have different starting points. Some come from more advantaged backgrounds, some from more disadvantaged backgrounds, some with more or less opportunity, et cetera, et cetera. And so the starting point matters. And so we take a look at the starting point and the distance they have to travel to close the preparation expectation gap. And it's a very different frame than saying, well, you can't write, your quantitative skills are poor, and just go down the list of what individuals don't have. We develop personalized approaches to help support students given their different starting points and things they need to work on. And because of this, students may be graduating on a different clock. Maybe not a traditional clock, maybe not a 4-year clock, but they may take a little longer because they have a different starting point. Rather than saying, well, the student doesn't have the aptitude or ability, we're talking about where they're starting and what they need to do to travel the distance in order to become successful and then move on to the next level. And here's an important thing. So many students we sometimes rush to conclusions about what a student should be doing with their lives. And so we talk about a plan B. You know, oh, you're clearly not cut out to do this. What's your plan B? We reframe it. We say, how can you reach what you say you want to do, but using a different pathway, a pathway B? And many of our students who are highly successful, who have gone on to graduate and medical school, law school, and so on, have taken that pathway B framework and they've run with it. They may have taken a little bit more time, but they got to where they originally wanted to go. Remember now, write down your questions. Write down your questions for yourselves. So, in terms of what BSP members report regarding advising outside of the program, now, this may be a biased sample in here. You folks probably don't do a lot of these things, okay? And these quotes you will find, many of you will find sort of off-putting. So, present company excluded, here's what students have reported that they experience in advising sessions outside of BSP. Advisors start off by talking with the students about their performance to date, their GPA, what their major or intended major is, and what their career goal is. They look at the transcript, they look at the GPA, they look at the number of good grades and bad grades. That's the starting point. Then they move into taking a look at their academic history, which high school they came from, how the SAT scores, their previous coursework, and so on. In other words, where did they come from, and how has that prepared them for the work that they say they want to do and the work to date? And if there's time, in a typical advising session, and this is what our students have told us, life circumstances are talked about. So what's going on? Tell me about your life circumstances, okay, if there's time. Now, this 1 through 3 approach, which of course, like any rubric, isn't hard and fast. There are variations and so on. But oftentimes results in rushing to conclusion or rushing to judgment. For example, here's a quote. A college advisor to a first semester BSP sophomore. C's in general and first semester organic chemistry. Have you considered a major and career more suited to your abilities and interests? Okay? So the student is in their first year, and this was the conclusion and the advice that the student was given based upon 2 data points. Here's another quote. Again, and this advisor used that traditional sort of the 1 through 3 approach. Departmental advisor to a rising BSP junior, you may like science, but science does not like you. And that was said based upon a transcript review, without knowing circumstance enough about the student's to those grades, to performance outcomes. Here's the inverted advising. And so we're trying this out for the first time because when Dr. Soto and I were sitting down yesterday, and for those of you that haven't met Missy Soto, Missy, would you raise your hand? She's BSP's Deputy Director. And we sat down and we were thinking about, how does BSP really do the advising? And so we came up with this inverted model. And here's the way it goes. And I don't know, this slide, and I said this to Missy, this slide really bothers me because of the sequence. The last thing that BSP talks about is the performance to date. We don't have that conversation until the last part before we start giving advice about what to do next. We do talk about preparation and academic history, but that happens second. And what we do begin with is a in-depth conversation about life circumstances. We want to establish a context. We want to look at contributing factors, influences that may contribute to either good or poor performance. We start off there. And what bothers me there is the inverted, the number sequence. But that's the way we do it. Now, do we always do it that way? We may start off with a brief discussion about performance. A student may come in and say, look, I'm failing organic chemistry. So we start there. But we quickly go to what's going on. What's going on? What are the circumstances? How many jobs are you working? Do you have a textbook yet? Those sorts of things. And so then we trace it back up. We trace it back up and we give our advice based upon a thorough examination of life circumstances. And all those things that all of us are. We're more than just our science. We're more than just the role we play at the university. And students are too. In terms of information, of course, in BSP we use GPAs and transcripts and scores. We take a look at those. But those are starting points for conversations. Okay? We aren't labeling, we aren't determining, science material, not science material based upon numbers. But we also, and this is what I've been talking about, listen to the stories and narratives of our students. We do a lot of listening before we do any prescription. And for example, here are some examples of the important narrative that kind of makes up or provides us with a context for our analysis. The fit between town and gown, that is the congruity or incongruity of Cal and back home. For many of our students, for many of the students in BSP, there's a great disparity. There's a disconnect between home and here. They're actually negotiating two very, very different cultures where the values, the language, the behavior, just all those things are so different. And that could be disconcerting, especially for a student who's just starting off at Berkeley. As a transfer student, as a freshman, entering freshman. And so that matters. Also, the compatibility of life circumstances, including our basic needs being met. And I hear this a lot from our students around food insecurity, around financial, living space insecurity, all those sorts of things. And also non-academic obligations for those students who are commuters, all the obligations they have back home. So that's the blessing because they're close to home, but that's also a problem because the expectation is that you will be back home and you will help out as you have when you were in high school. That matters. And also the gap between preparation and expectation. When did you last take general chemistry? Oh, it was in the 10th grade. Was it well taught? Oh, no, they just read out of the book. Yeah, it's those sorts of things that are important to know. And finally, all the psychosocial dynamics. One of identity. Identity is a very big thing for all of us. And identity is called into question. What are you? Are you enough of whatever you identify with? Also, efficacy, your ability to do the work. Can you actually do the work that's expected of you, not just at Berkeley, but at STEM at Berkeley? And also belonging. Where do I belong? Do I belong here? Is this home? Or what about back home? And some students have said to me after their first semester here at Berkeley, I don't have a home anymore. when I go back home over the winter break, it doesn't feel like home anymore. It does not feel like home. So where is my home? I'm not comfortable here, I'm not comfortable there. So where do I belong? But what about the real limitations and constraints on our work? I think it's really important. We need to situate this conversation within the realities, our realities as advisors. So the external constraints, the number of students and time, caseload, the amount of time we have to really go through with students and really get to know them. How many visits, over what interval of time? Many of us have really large caseloads, and that is a challenge. That is a reality. So I'm talking about what we do in the program, but we have luxury of program, don't we? Because we have, we have about 350 students, something like that. And right now we have one advisor. Right now we have one advisor. And so you're saying, piece of cake, some of you. Our advising load is much larger than that. So quit talking about what we should do because you have the luxury of program. You take all comers versus program members only, okay? You may not know these students. They do not know you. You don't have that same sort of relationship with the students that we have in BSP. They apply online, then they go through interviews, a subset go through interviews, and then we select a subset from that. There's a familiarity and there's a commitment to the program. And so it's a very, very different situation. And also, what about the support you get in terms of training? And also, what about the rewards? In terms of merit increases, career advancement, and so on. Is it built in to the structure, the reward structure for advisors, to actually do more, to do different, to learn how to approach advising in a more effective way? And so these are all constraints. These are all challenges. And last but not least, your role. What is your role? In BSP, the advisor's role is to promote success. Now, one would say all advisors should be doing that, but maybe you have signature authority and you're going to determine whether or not somebody is going to be dismissed or somebody's going to continue. BSP does not have that. So that's a difference right there. And also the mandates that come from the program that you're with, the department you're with, or the college you're with. These are all critical distinctions. And so think of your questions as we move into the second half of this workshop. And so enough for me talking. And Jay, you just came just in time. Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. So why don't you come on up? Come on up. Here we have 3 BSPers, and they have graciously invested their time in this workshop. They feel so strongly about the importance of advising, and maybe you could just do a quick introduction of each of yourselves, then we'll talk about one question. Faustino.
Hey, how's it going on? My name is Faustino Gonzalez, and I'm really thankful for all of y'all showing up today. I could tell that all y'all really care about us, and we hope to make this a productive panel.
Thank you, Faustino.
Hi, everyone. My name is Yesenia. I just want to extend my gratitude like Faustino. I'm actually a peer advisor for Biology Scholars Program, and now I feel what you feel when you get all these students coming to you, so thank you for your work.
Hello, everybody. My name is Kwaje Johnson. This is my 4th year studying MCB Genetics with a Race and Law minor. And I'm very avid about these sorts of panels, so I'm always super excited, especially when it's John. The work that he does is super inspiring, and it's just amazing. So thank you all for being here. And thank you, John, for spewing out your wisdom.
Of course. You're welcome. And now it's your turn to spew out your wisdom. And so here's the question. There's one question, and I want to make the best use of your time and their time. And the question is, what advice would you give us, all of us, including me up here, okay? I want to hear from you. To make our advising more effective for all students, but most especially those who are marginalized in STEM. And what I want to do is not have them go down the row like this, but I want somebody to start off, and we'll see if we could do a weave here, if we can make this more conversational than just simply a presentation. So who would like to start? What advice? Jay, you want to?
Yeah. So some advice that I would give is you see a lot of students. You see students on their good days and on their bad days. You see students who are first years and are fourth years. So one tactic that I would suggest you do is connect people. Ask, of course, first if, someone's coming in and they're doing great and they're in a specific field, or, ask them, hey, I have another student. Would you mind me connecting you with them? Because sometimes you can only extend so much of your advising, but if you connect them with somebody who's similar to them or in the same field, that can be extremely helpful in terms of navigating Berkeley on a larger scale beyond academics.
And so, Jay, you're talking about sort of creating this network among students.
Yeah.
And that may take more than just remembering. That may take some sort of structure.
Yeah.
Some sort of structure or network. Should that be run by peer advisors? Is that something, or how can peer advisors and current students work with the professional advisors?
So yeah, definitely utilize the peer advisors, but I do want you all professionals to be in the door in the conversation with that, because it's more interconnected than just tossing it off to the peer advisors. Okay. It allows more accountability on your end to, I guess, take more seriously the people that come in and memorize them, or kind of retain the information that's given to you, and that in the long run will help you advise them when they come back to see you.
So, Yesenia, you're currently a peer advisor along with Glendy. What role should peer advisors play in making those connections? I mean, even in BSP, it's a smaller population, but you have Camila, who's our new staff advisor. But how do you see it? How do you see that sort of connecting?
I see Glendy and I as mediators. So we do a lot of the job that Kwaje is saying to you all. We connect students. We have a BSP Facebook group just for students, and we make sure to connect them because peer advisors are recent graduates or upperclassmen that know these students, that have grown with these students and are part of our cohort. So we are able to make the connections that Kwaje is referring to. But also with Camila right now, we're introducing her to the BSP family and how that works. So we're introducing her to the Facebook group, how to connect students, how the bonds are made within our BSP study space, and letting her know that the interconnectedness of the community is the strength of the community, so that she could capitalize on that and make sure that the BSP students are making connections with their community to rise together.
So Faustino, about this or anything else, advice?
I'm thinking of the question, and I'm looking back at all my great advisors in the past, and I think what really helped create a positive relationship was the positive relationship. I got to know them, and then having time and seeing them on a weekly basis and creating a friendship almost. It was so easy to remember our names because it wasn't something artificial. And yeah, I think it begins with friendliness. Saying, hey, how's it going? How's your day? How's it treating? And also understanding that in the past, the types of relationships that they had with their counselors is also going to influence the way they see you, someone who they might not know as well.
So some of you out there have a huge caseload, and you may not be able to get to know your students well enough to form the type of relationship that Faustino is explaining. And also there may be a wait period because the volume of demand is so high, and you may have to wait 2 weeks, and maybe the situation is maybe, in other words, that large size scale really does matter. Are there any recommendations that you have, because you've been on that receiving end, possibly in the department and also at the college level?
Yeah, so like you said, the large amount makes it hard to actually establish those sorts of connections sometimes, but any interaction that you have with a student, make it as genuine as possible, make it as full, undivided attention as possible, make it as intentional as possible, because you may not be able to see that student on a weekly basis, but that's going to mean a lot for them because they're coming in there for a reason. They're coming in there to get some sort of support and feel supported. And so if you're opening yourself in that manner, they'll feel that and they'll leave feeling much more satisfied otherwise.
Yeah, I think the point Kwajay makes is very important. The feeling that we leave with as students after leaving the advising session is very important in terms of determining whether we're going to go back, whether we're going to look for another advisor, or whether we're going to reach out to the different departments. A lot of the students that come to us have expressed that they don't like MCB advising, they don't like LNS advising, and EOP is doing a really good job of bringing their own advisors for their own space. So just what Kwajay said, make sure that those interactions are genuine and they leave feeling as if you understood them and you listen to them. Be active listeners in everything that they say. Don't disqualify anything of their identity. Make sure that everything that they say is listened to and you incorporate it into the type of advice that you give.
I completely agree with that. It's the little things that go a long way. I remember back in community college, I'm a community college transfer. I didn't see my counselor for over a period of 1 year at least. And when I saw him once again, he said, "Hey, Faustino, are you still swimming?" And he remembered that. And it was that little thing that really went a long way. So just simply remembering a name, simply remembering maybe something that they had on their shirt, something so simple could put my counselor in a friendship type mode. And it released that, oh, you're the counselor and I'm the student and we're supposed to have that relationship. And just breaking that with a simple little detail that you remembered could really go a long way.
Yeah, so I hear a lot of the comfortability that's being established with within that sort of dynamic. So I don't know if y'all drink tea, but having tea available, it makes me come back. So I'm just saying it's the little things. It may not be the exact...
Write that down.
It might not be the exact form of comfortability that you offer, but any form is definitely memorable.
Thank you.
I love tea. And...
So they planned this. They planned this. Yeah.
And I remember we had a tea time with Diana. Oh my gosh. And just having tea time
with
Diana. Diana is one of the previous BSP advisors. She's moving on to UCSF to conduct research. But while having tea time with her, the environment was so different from just the sitting down and talking with them that it opened up the conversation to a lot more things outside of the school.
Okay.
And that really brought comfort to me.
Okay.
And it was good.
So I'm going to ask you, maybe I want to push a little bit here. Sometimes bad news needs to be delivered. Okay? What advice would you have for the advisors out there to deliver that bad news around academic probation, about being dismissed, about all those sorts of things? Let's push a little bit. What would you recommend?
You know, I've never been a counselor. So what kind of bad news are you guys going to deliver? May I have some examples?
Like academic probation, if somebody has to leave.
So talk about that. Is there any way to make that a constructive, more positive, or is it just plain old bad news?
I think anything can be constructive if you just find a way to make it constructive. You have to keep in mind that these students, they're not only their transcripts or their GPA. We keep telling them that, but I feel like as advisors, sometimes when we say constructive feedback, we forget that. So even though it is bad news, let them know that there's a way out. And don't. It's difficult because you need to tell them that there's a way out, but not pressure them to find that way out. Because we need to understand the situation they're in, the situation they're about to be in because of this bad news, and let them know that there's been others in their space that have made it out. So one of the things we have right now with BSP going on is like a Faces of Perseverance campaign. We've showed them alumni that have been in their shoes, that have maybe been in academic probation, reached out of it, and they've got there. But when they go to counseling, you don't have to tackle them with, well, you're here now, but you could get out of it. Just listen to where they're at and find avenues which you can point them into.
So yeah, on that note, don't deliver a sense of hopelessness in this situation. It's probably the worst thing and it's happened to my friend before. It's just like bawling, crying. And I'm just like, I had to deliver that other way out, or those examples of how you can make it through this. And it was so sad. But as a friend, I was able to do that. And I feel like you all have the capacity to do that by listening, you know of resources. If it may be a little emotional in that room, you could slide a paper of already printed out resources and examples, because I know there's some out there if anyone wants to like take the initiative and construct something like that, but just have it readily available. And yeah, just avoid delivering a sense of hopelessness when you do, because it is hard news. So there's only so much you can do in terms of easing the stress and emotion that may come with delivering this news, but just be more humanistic in that delivery.
And I think another factor is just, like Kwaja say, being human, I guess. They're already receiving the bad news from the institution, and we wouldn't want our advisors to be another source of bad news. We want y'all to be like a source of hope, a source of positive energy that we could leave with, even through all the mess that we're going through.
That would be a great time to introduce them to someone who has gone through the similar bad news. I would think.
Interesting.
It's when we're going through bad times, it's easy to feel like we're alone, like it's happening to only us. And if we're remembered that we're not the only ones, that this is happening to other people, and maybe even grouping us together, I think that would help.
Okay. So we have a few minutes here. If you don't mind, maybe I can open up the floor to questions. Please, Avi.
So, what are students telling you they don't like about LMS advising?
You sure you want me to answer that right now?
They just don't feel related to the advisors that they see. They feel like some of the statements that have been put up here, they have been reiterated in different versions to them by LNS advising. So they reach out to us, and even though we're not fully prepared in that form as peer advisors, we try to reach out to our own academic advisors, such as Camila, to help us with those things. But it's just terms of being understood and listened to is different from just hearing what the student has said. Giving them like a list that you have already prepared is different to just listen where the student is coming from and what they need in reality.
I've heard so many things, unfortunately, about LNS advising, and it begins with just the accessibility sometimes. There's a lot of students in LNS, so I understand that's only in so much of your control, but when they actually do get seen, they feel like one of those numbers. They just feel like, okay, let's hurry up, and once you're out, on to the next one. And I've heard that it's been a waste of time, that they didn't get answers. They felt like their advisor was irritated. I've also heard that since the advisor was irritated, it was more of they didn't even check and see if the answers that was being asked or like they can give an answer to it. They was just like, yeah, I just don't know. I don't know. And I'm like, how can you be advisor and back to back say, I don't know to these students' questions, many of them freshmen, knowing that this is for them, you're the only outlet until they come into programs such as BSP where they have alternative advising. So just understanding that some of these people navigating the system a lot of them are freshmen, and it's already hard enough for them to come to you as their said source of information and not be able to receive that. And so they leave feeling like, where else do I go if not advising?
Other questions? In the back, Karina.
So my question to you then is, what are your expectations when it comes to meeting with an academic advisor? What would you like to see? Because I think so I work for MCB and IB, and I can tell you that our staff is really dedicated and passionate about what they do, but we are kind of within that category of constraints, number of advisors, number of students, et cetera. So I'd like to hear more about what you would like to see come out of these interactions and what you come in expecting in these advising meetings.
Good question.
I would say, for example, I'm going to go to my counselor in the MCB office. I wouldn't want to think, oh, I'm gonna go see my counselor. I would prefer to think of it as I'm gonna see Clara. And that begins with relationship forming. Yeah, and little things like remembering names and remembering little details about a person could really meld to all the things we just talked about in the previous question.
I just want to say I have no complaints about MCB advising on my behalf. I feel like a lot of students don't get that that first name basis, but I've been able to, and I suck with names. I'm terrible. I don't even know my counselor's name, and she knows mine, and that was beautiful. And yeah, she calls me Quad J, not just J. And so I want to commend that office. I see the effort, and I have no problem going in there for advising. So I feel like you all are a model type of advising office. Yes, it kind of gets crazy during certain periods of the semester, but I'm aware of those and I try to avoid getting advising them, but other people may not know. So I guess in those times, just that patience factor, we're all human, but for the advisors, I advise you to be a little bit more patient during those times and not feel like you need to rush people out of the office. Because I understand, like, I've felt rushed out of the office before, but I, as a student, as a fourth year, understood why. But some people who are undergrads that are like first year, second year, they may not know. So during those times, just a little bit more patient and attentiveness to the student that you're seeing then, not thinking of the next one or the next one and the next one. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think both bring up good points. Also with MCB advising, I feel like sometimes I'm just handed, I've been to MCB advising, I'm an MCB major. I've just been handed the pamphlet with like, this is what MCB wants, these are the classes you want. And like sometimes I can find that online. I really go to advising to see the person that's there, to know that even though there's so many requirements and this school just seems like they're trying to kick me out, that a person is there understanding me. So I want to go there and see, what I see online, but also have that sense of reassurance leaving that I will succeed in MCB and reaching my pre-medical goals.
Definitely. Looking back at my first years going to the MCB advising office, I do want to note that it was kind of, it was terrible. I kind of looked at like, what are you doing here? And I didn't like that feeling. So for those who are in marginalized groups pursuing the science, I would like to see more welcoming, like environment for them, intentional welcoming even, because it can be very hard to navigate this campus and even harder to navigate this campus as a minority group, and even harder for the LGBT minority people in the sciences to come into these offices and not feel intentionally welcomed. All it takes is I see you and I'm smiling, not what are you doing in here? You lost? Yeah, that's not very comfortable. But I guess as my, I've made myself an identity in the sciences, it's been easier for me to be in the MCB advising. But I do recall those moments as a first year where I was just like questioning ever coming back into these spaces. So just more intentional welcoming for people that you know are marginalized.
I was wondering if you're going to be covering interactions with faculty that are advisors and what you think of those interactions.
Yeah. What's been your experience interacting with faculty advisors?
I had to get my signature. I'm not even sure what the signature is for. To get my MCB approval. I don't know what it is. But I went to a faculty advisor and I was like, I need the signature. And then they started talking to me. They asked me about my career goals and stuff. And I let them know. And then they're like, well, your GPA is really low. And I was like, yeah, but I have all these other things. Like, I am really invested in BSP, and I have this passion, and I got this internship. They're like, maybe you should look at other advising offices. And even though they gave me the signature to get my MCB major declared, or I don't know what the signature was for, but I got it from them, they just left me they left me feeling as if I needed to do way more, break myself at school while I'm breaking myself at my job to get the GPA that everybody wants. But I feel like my GPA isn't everything that I have to offer, and they weren't able to see that when I was there, and that's what I needed when I went to them.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I felt extremely bombarded with questions that we're not followed up with resources or opportunities or, that wisdom that I know that they have to offer, all of the different connections. I've heard from other people who declared before me that they went and they got their signatures and they were just hit with all of these different opportunities, these resources. They got their faculty advisor's email and was able to talk to them afterward. And I didn't get any of that. I just got all of these questions, feeling like I was being questioned on, are you sure you want to do this? Instead of, hey, I understand that you want to do this and here's how I can help. And so it was more like, dang, I have to answer these questions and this person's already really intimidating because I actually know who they are and what they do, but they don't know me. And it was just a whole bunch of questions and kind of like trying to convince me not to do it. That's what I felt like. And so I left there feeling extremely anxious and full of anxiety. Yeah.
Were you asking for a specific scenario?
Well, it just seems to me that in faculty meetings and other interactions that perhaps some faculty don't have as much training in advising, especially when it comes to social skills. And while they may know the academic requirements, the way they interact with people, and I realize, that many of us have difficulties with time commitments and all, but I just wondered if there was a general sense of recommendations that you might have for faculty that are doing advising.
Like teacher faculty, is that from what I feel the sense for most of my teachers is that they're very busy. They're very busy. It's hard to get a email response. When I do go to their office hours, they're very helpful, but outside of their office hours, it's hard to get a hold of them. But overall, it's positive. When I do get a chance to, I'm a go-getter. If I want to talk to someone and get to know them and learn from them, or most importantly, I'll find them. So I think it depends on person to person.
I think my advice would be just to share a little bit about you. Break that awkwardness. I know some faculty do have trouble with social skills, but break that awkwardness by letting them know how invested and how passionate you are about your research. And that will make us passionate about maybe pursuing research or any of the careers that we want to, just because we see you showing that passion. And showing that passion not only for what you're doing, but also for maybe what the student might do in the future. Like if they tell you, I want to do pediatrics. Wow, have you heard about the research going on in the pediatrics department? I'm involved in this. It's so wonderful. I feel like just sharing a little bit about you, knowing we're not going only to you for a signature, that would leave the student with more motivation to pursue their major choice.
Also, it's likely that the relationship that is there is the teacher and the student who is not necessarily doing so well in the course, and it would be great if my my teacher would remind me that, yeah, you may have not done so well, but you learned something and you have this knowledge, and this knowledge cannot be taken away from you. And even though, yes, I may have gotten a low grade or a below average midterm, knowing that I know something and that no one can take it away from me, and that I worked hard for it, that really helps. So just being reminded of that would really go a long way.
Yeah, so that reassurance factor is everything. Like, you're our last signature before we are officially declared in this crazy field. And just to have some reassurance, like, hey, if you need anything, not even like extending yourself, because I know that you're busy, but if you have any questions, stop by when I'm available. Here are my availabilities, or having your availability be available. Or if you have any colleagues that you may know are in the field that this student has just expressed interest in, that simple, hey, let me see if I can connect you with someone, and just having that reassurance factor so that they can feel a little bit more prepared pursuing this field.
One last question.
Is this working?
Yes.
Yeah. How often has an advisor or a faculty advisor pointed out to you the assets that you have from your life experiences and the diversity that you're bringing to the campus?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry, I'm starstruck right now. I didn't know you were in the room. I love you. Wow. Like, what?
You're sweet.
You're hidden.
how often has an advisor or a faculty advisor or advisor from the college pointed out to you how your life experiences could be an asset to STEM field that you're studying?
That's a good question, Nika.
For me, just once, and it was an advisor under EOP. And everything else always in the BSP office.
What did they say? What did they say to you?
I was trying to get an extra semester, and I went and I was explaining that this was the only time that I had to be here because I was doing an internship and I was commuting to SF, and she just told me to calm down and breathe and that I was doing great. And even that small "you're doing great" was a reassurance that like all the hard work that I'm putting in, commuting to SF without getting that stipend is like worth it, because she saw the amount of work that I was putting into my major.
So I don't know if it's surprisingly, but same, it was EOP. It was a series almost of reassuring and kind of pinpointing that my life experiences are an asset, because I decided in the midst of me pursuing science and all this other stuff that I needed to present a bill, AB 2247, which is for stability in foster care, getting rid of that 7-day notice and the abrupt placement changes that interrupt people's lives, literally. And it's not my story to tell, but there was someone on trial for this bill, 17 years old, moved 32 times in a span of 2 years. And you can only think of the amount of detachment issues, all of these different things that come up with having no stability. And I really wanted to pursue this bill, and instead of going into this office and hearing, yo, you have way too much on your plate, Jay, it was more of a, you know how it feels and you know where your passions lie, so pursue it. And then even with the possibility of it not passing, you got this and your passion's going to reign through, so don't even think about you wasting your time if it doesn't get passed. You're going to get it, and in your mind, if you know that, someone out there is going to benefit from this bill. And it was passed, signed by the governor. So as of January 2019, it will be a law.
Wow.
And just having that, thank you. Just having that advisor reassure me in those moments where I wasn't too sure of how to extend myself. They saw my worth and how hardworking I was, and saw that this is something that is possible and you do have the capacity to pursue this. And it was them that allowed me to manifest it. So yeah.
Faustino, the last word.
Sadly, in the MCB department, it has never come up. But my Portuguese teacher, she asked us, "Oh, tell me about yourself. Tell me about your personal experiences." And I was supposed to write it in Portuguese. And then I turned it in, and she was just shocked. She was like, "You sold oranges when you were 5, and you continued that for 8 years? Then you graduated high school and you went into metal grinding and you did that for 4 years." And I just wrote all the jobs I've had in my past, and she was just shocked. And I would imagine that other MCB faculty would also be shocked of the amount of experience I've had in the workforce, but sadly it hasn't come up. Yeah.
So I want to thank our panelists, Kwaje, Yesenia, and Faustino. Thank you very much for being here. Now's the time for your questions. And again, the main talking points we had were these talking points. And are there any more questions that you have for each other or for our remaining panelists here? Please.
Thank you. So I actually had more of a question towards your, I think you call them your goals.
Yes.
Your talent development versus talent search. You mentioned that you measure for, or you look for potential.
Yes.
So I'm wondering, like, how do you measure potential?
That is a really good question. We just revised our the questions that we ask on the application to become a member, because we're looking at non-cognitive variables. And Dr. Soto, do you want to talk a little bit about our thinking around this? Because we're trying to get a handle on potential.
Sure. So we look for students with potential to succeed, students who are willing to seek and give help, students who exhibit resilience. students who we take into consideration distance traveled, hardships and persistence around that. And so we follow the work of Dr. Sedlicek. And essentially, we rewrote the BSP application questions such that they reflected some or most. It's part art and part science, so that they matched, and so that we're able to assess to the degree possible some of those non-cognitive variables. So that's a quick synopsis.
We're still trying to figure out why BSP works. Is it selection? And if it is that, in part, how do we select? What do we look for? And then the other part is treatment. That is in terms of how we support our students, how we advise, how we conduct study groups, how we mentor our students. And so we're still trying to tease all of that apart. But I think that the change in the application was a positive step forward because we begin to granularize sort of our search for undervalued talent. Okay? Either way.
So BSP obviously has a lot of successes, and it's a tremendous program. I was wondering about the students that aren't admitted, and what % of students that apply to BSP, what % do you accept into the program, and what happens to those that are not accepted?
So in the past, 1 in 4 applicants was accepted, 1 in 4. This last cycle, I think it was 1 in 2. 1 and 2. I'm not sure why the shift. I'm not exactly sure what's happened. Was it because we changed the application and we made the questions much more pointed? One of the questions, what was one of the questions? If you didn't go to college, what would you choose to do? That was one of the questions. That's an odd question to ask on an application to an academic program at UC Berkeley. But we got some really, really interesting answers that we used to kind of tease apart. And we asked other questions like that. Dr. Soto and I sat down one day and kind of, talked about exactly what to do. So it's 1 in 2 this last cycle. And what happens to those students who don't get into BSP? Some of them have friends in BSP. And so there is sort of a BSP effect. There's a halo effect. They hang around, they'll go to the student room. They may even choose to go to study groups. They may even come in and maybe get advice, a little bit of mentoring. And so maybe our impact is beyond those who are officially, formally members. But how do they do in comparison? Andrew, you took a look at the performance of those who applied and didn't get into BSP?
Speak to that. Yeah, we've done a little bit to look at the students who apply but didn't get into BSP. There is some of that ambiguity that you mentioned around how many of them are sort of BSP adjacent versus don't have any contact.
They're still maybe getting the treatment.
So many of them do quite well. BSP students do slightly better, but the applicants do better than the students who didn't apply but have similar profiles. So what's happening? I don't know. But we've started to look at that, but there's a lot more to untangle.
Good, thank you. Andrew's been really wonderful in trying to helping us to answer all the questions we have about why BSP works. What about BSP?
I'm just going to add something real quick. Also, some of the students that don't make it in, they take John's classes before they reapply the next semester. So that helps. And
so that's part of the treatment. I teach 2 classes.
I want to get back to this issue of what treatment is happening and how it works. because you mentioned study groups in the BSP room, and I want to get Faustino's impression on this too, is one of the key differences that we like to say between outside the U.S. and inside the U.S. Education, especially for adolescents, is community versus individualism, or atomization versus building community. And I'm wondering, I'm talking in the resource and security things, I was thinking back to when I was an undergrad or freshman, and I was an EOP, and I still remember how I had to come up with an excuse when somebody said, why don't we go for coffee, as to why I couldn't go for coffee, when the real reason was I couldn't afford to go to coffee. And today, I remember that the lounges in the dorms and the units when I lived there were crowded at night. And then a few years later, after I had graduated, I would go back to tutor, and there's nobody in the lounges. And I'd ask the RAs, where is everybody? Are they all hanging out in clubs in San Francisco? Are they all sitting in Starbucks? Or where is everybody? And they said, oh, no, they're still communing, but they're at their laptops in their rooms, in communal chat rooms. And that's how they're communing now.
I see.
I walk around now and you see, every new building on campus has to have a cafe in it. It seems like it's a new rule. And they're always crowded all day with people sitting around studying. And I'm wondering, so are there non-commercial spaces within which students can develop some community, like the BSP spaces, or courses that consciously encourage people to get into study groups or find other opportunities to commune together rather than be alone at Berkeley? That if there's anything we've all heard for years at Berkeley, it's that the chance to not be alone, or to see that you're not the only one in a given situation, is therapeutic here. And so is it just, if we came up with half a dozen other ways to find affiliations among students, and then just said, you with this affiliation, here's a space for you to hang out,
sure,
would that already have kind of a treatment effect?
So Faustino first, and then others who know about spaces where this happens.
If I'm understanding the question right, you're saying what sort of environmental conditions allow for students to form study groups which will help them succeed?
Is hanging out in study rooms better than sitting in Starbucks?
And
where are people sitting these days?
My first semester here, it was really hard for me to find anyone to study with. I was a transfer student, and when I did find people to study with, magically we found out that we were also transfers. So it was finding a common ground with that I see, like, for example, say if certain students like to play basketball and they're also in the class, then they'll start hanging out. And in the BSP room, we all come from the similar neighborhood, and that's why we form these study groups. We don't necessarily study the same things, but we have the friendship, we have that comfort factor, and that's what allows us to study together. Is there something that you would like me to?
Yeah, I like hearing. I like hearing that, but I'm also trying to make sort of an anti-commercial case of saying that the people thinking that your main outlet for a study opportunity is now a cafe rather than some kind of a study group or some kind of a club or some kind of a university-controlled space is perhaps a way of preventing people from getting the benefit of hanging out together.
Please. We have a BSP alumna here who's now in graduate school.
Okay, yeah, hi, I'm Michelle, and I was a BSPer, and now I'm a graduate student in MCB. And I completely agree with you. So like Faustino, I was a transfer student, and it is very isolating. And you're right, there is a very commercial pressure to basically hang out at a cafe and study with other people, right? And I found that I feel like you hit the nail, whatever, I forget the saying. But in BSP, I had a space where I could leave my backpack, leave my stuff, leave my lunch that I prepared ahead of time so I don't have to buy it once on campus, and prepare tea, that you brought, or there's some available already. And I think that these study groups just happen, like you can stay there for hours and not feel pressured, like every 2 hours I need to buy something in order to remain here and use the internet. So and I'm not aware of other places that aren't outdoors on campus that kind of have this safe study area. And I know other campuses do, like Davis has a really nice study area. So I totally agree with that.
So maybe the proposition is that we need to create more inexpensive, safe spaces for students to form community. Maybe that's it. Please.
Hi, my name is Della, and I would invite all of you to come through the Student Learning Center at Cesar Chavez. At any given point in time, from 9 o'clock in the morning on, there are 200 students in the atrium and mezzanine of the Cesar Chavez Student Center studying together. We have study rooms, we have study groups, we have workshops, we have adjunct courses, but we also have this huge space that students organically create their own study groups within, and that space is available.
Thank you. Karen, behind you. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Patricia. I'm an advisor in CNR. We also have a resource room for all of our College of Natural Resources students. It's just a study space, tables, students get together, just hang out, make community. But I actually have a different question.
Yes.
You talked about helping a student who's experiencing incongruity, like the town and gown relation. And I have this with my transfer students a lot. I'm at home, I take care of my little sister, I have this job, I come to Cal and I'm a completely different person. Outside of having a supportive, empathic response and listening to the student, I'm not quite sure what to do for them. How do I address this issue with many of my transfer students? How do I help them outside of, I'm so sorry, that sucks, really just listening and doing the basic stuff.
Are we thinking of the same student, the one who did the poster on the BART ride from Richmond to Berkeley?
I've not seen that poster, but I have probably somebody like that.
Yeah, because what she did was she recorded the number of deaths due to violence going from her home in Richmond, then going through, in quotes, safer and safer spaces to the university. And I think her instructor and her peers really understood more about the difference between back home and the university. And I'm going to go, to answer your question, I'm going to go to something that Faustino and Kwaje and Yesenia said. Find other students who may be able to give this student advice because they've gone through a similar sort of bridging between these really different cultures. I would say that I'm sure that she's not the only one. It's she. Is that correct?
It's more than one student, unfortunately.
Okay. Yes. Faustino.
I've actually gone through this, and the cure-all was finding a hobby. Yeah, my first semester here, I just said, I'm here at Cal. I'm here to study, so that's what I'm going to do. So I studied, and by half of the semester, I was gassed out, and then everything fell down from there. But then eventually, I found IM's intramural sports. I played soccer, and even if I had had a tough day, if I went to my soccer game, I would feel rejuvenated by the end of it. And then I became involved in judo. And finding an extracurricular that's not too demanding.
Hi, I'm asking this question as a BSP alumnus because I experienced the program from the student side, not from the programmatic side. I'm wondering how often do BSP students receive BSP advising? Specifically, like, is it just at whatever frequency the student happens to reach out for that advising, or is there a certain mandated period of, check-in after a certain number of months or a year or something like that?
So with new BSP members, there's a mandatory advising check-in. But once the student passes the first year, then they're on their own. And this has been a challenge for us because, again, our advisors do not have signature authority. They don't have the power to approve transition into majors and so on. And in spite of the fact that we heard such positive things about BSP, we do have our challenges. We need more foot traffic. We need more contact. Students may be getting advice that may not, mostly from one another and maybe from other peers on campus, that may not be comprehensive in its analysis. And so we're working on this right now. We're working on trying to get greater student contact, and we're also doing this with study groups. Study groups, I know the Learning Center has study groups. And we're trying to really make sure that our study groups really meet the needs, that our advising really meet the needs of our current students. Because we've seen a fall off, and maybe the reason is that a lot of stuff can be done virtually. You can look at Khan Academy videos and learn, general chemistry. But there's still that great need for that interpersonal contact and then building relationships and trust and support. And so I think we're in transition right now. I know we're in transition right now. And we're working very hard on making sure that we're putting our paths where the students are actually walking. That what we did 26 years ago when I started BSP along with Caroline Kane, that what we're doing now is relevant to today's student. I know there are some core things, the importance of relationships, the importance of trust, the importance of being heard and valued, what you bring. But how we do things like advising and study groups, those are things that we're working on. And if we say it worked before, so it's got to work today, we're dead in the water. Yeah, we're rethinking this right now as we speak. Other questions? Andrew. Andrew, for those who don't know you, what position do you hold on campus?
Sure.
What's your role?
Hi, my name is Andrew, and I am the Institutional Research Analyst in the Division of Equity and Inclusion. So I do data stuff that relates to both issues within the Division of Equity and Inclusion as well as programs like BSP that are very in the spirit of equity and inclusion, the division, but are not formally within us. So in some of the work that we've done together, as well as work I've done outside of our work, it seems that there are some real hurdles, particular courses in the lower division that create large jumps in inequity.
And you just gave a talk on that.
I did.
Yeah.
But so one of them, and this is part of our original work, was looking at the biological sciences, was identifying Chem 3A as a major stumbling block for lower division courses for intended bio majors. But it seems that BSP students don't get hit by that bump to the degree that similar students do, although it hits everybody, but it hits minoritized students harder, except in those in BSP. Can you speak to, in terms of advising, or just how do you prepare students, or what is it that helps students get through that hurdle, and what are some things that maybe you hear from students who aren't in BSP, or the ones who still struggle with it? Like, what are the challenges that they're facing? Is it getting can you tell me more about what that is like, and how advisors might be able to support students when they're not BSP advisors?
Sure. So the readiness to succeed in Chem 3A, I think that's That's something that we've tried to determine. And that readiness is both in terms of how well students have done up to that point, what they're taking in combination with Chem 3A, from whom they're taking the course. Because at Berkeley and elsewhere, you don't take courses, you take instructors. And so we find out about particular instructors. And it's about all the things that are going on in that student's life and whether they can dedicate the time necessary for them to do well. And so what are their commitments beyond coursework, how many units, et cetera. And so I think that's sort of deep advising, looking to kind of contextualize taking Chem 3A for that particular individual, I think is the way how we've done it. And historically, we've had study groups that have supported that teach actually to the instructor who's actually teaching that semester. And so it's not just organic chemistry, but it's, you know, that particular instructor. And so I think also that students take the course together. And so they, you know, they meet the challenge together. So they're not alone, I think is really, really critical. And so I think all those things add up. But do I have evidence for that? No. This is all anecdotal. This is all anecdotal. And so I you know, Mika is a social psychologist, and you know, this is the stuff that I've observed, and I'm not formally trained, but this is what I've kind of gleaned over all these years. And so we really have to, you know, do the research to make sure that it's just not one of John's stories about success and what contributes to that success.
Yes, I just had a quick, I guess, clarification question.
Yes.
When do students apply to BSP? Freshmen, sophomores?
So most students apply as freshmen, first semester freshmen, and first semester transfer students. But we get the full range. Sophomores, juniors, we've even had some seniors apply to the program. But ideally, we want to get students early. We want to get them early so we could begin to actually work with them and build that trust and that relationship from the get-go. And let me be really clear. We don't try to do it all for the students. So we have an entering freshman, but we do targeted referral to department advisors, to college advisors, to the Tang Center, financial aid, and so on. But typically most are first semester freshmen or transfers. But that doesn't say that if you're out there without BSP that you can't apply, because in fact some of the most appreciative students are students who have experienced Berkeley without a program. And they really value the program because of the contrast between out there and within the program.
That was me. I spent 2 years, my first 2 years here, not in the program, and then so I spent my first 2 years here outside of BSP, and then applied during the beginning of my third year and got in. So I got to see that difference in my college experience from first half to second half, and it was night and day. And so that's why I'm actually extremely appreciative of the work that BSP does for students.
And what did you go on to do after you graduated?
So a year ago, I finished my PhD in biology, and now I'm back here at UC Berkeley as staff doing STEM outreach in high schools on behalf of the Lawrence Hall of Science.
Thank you.
And also, just to hit on your previous question, I agree with everything that John said as far as reasons why BSP students might be not hit so hard by organic chemistry. I was not in BSP when I took organic chemistry, and after I got into the program and I was seeing how those students who were taking organic chemistry, how they were studying, it was the complete opposite in terms of effectiveness from how I approached it, and I almost failed organic chemistry. And by just, the skin of my teeth, I managed to pass and advance to the rest of, the biology course requirements. I was studying completely by myself, trying to just memorize stuff Whereas after I got into the program and I saw these clusters of groups who were studying together for organic chemistry, they were testing each other, and they were quizzing each other all the time. So it was a very, very active approach that they were taking to their studying, which I'm sure they learned from their study groups and were then applying it outside of the formal study group.
And I'm going to get really old school here, but there was a person on campus in the 70s by the name of Uri Treisman. Has anybody heard that name? What? No, he was in mathematics. He was actually with the Professional Development Program. Uri Treisman won the MacArthur Genius Award for looking at how Asian students at Berkeley succeeded in math. And was there a math gene that Asian students had versus other students? And he found out that what you just described, Octavio, was exactly what those students were doing. They were forming study groups. They were working. They were testing each other. They were actually exchanging best study strategies. And they kind of shrunk down the university by creating these study groups. And Uri's at UT Austin right now, and he's had a really national impact on how to teach math, how to engage students in math, how to help students succeed from all backgrounds in math. And so the Treisman, Uri and I worked together. He and I worked together, and yeah, so our work continues along in parallel. Advising questions. Advising questions. Questions about BSP back there.
Sorry, I raised my hand before forming my question.
That's okay. Form it in real time.
Yeah. My name is Joanna. I work in the Alumni Scholars Program through the Cal Alumni Association. And thank you for putting on this workshop. It's been really energizing, and thank you to the students for sharing their experience. I was wondering how often students bring up concerns around housing and food security. I find myself right now in a situation where I feel I've exhausted all the resources that Berkeley has provided for the students. And I was also wondering if the BSP program has been in a situation where you've tried to engage the chancellor or other higher level staff to communicate that there's a greater need for more resources, or if you're collaborating with other community spaces on campus to address that issue. Like, how can we organize as staff on campus?
Misty, do you want to speak to what just happened around the food pantry? And
so our new staff member, Camila, recently reached out to the food pantry to reach out to them, to ask them what resources they have available. And we have recently partnered with us, and they essentially stopped by and, dropped off snacks and goodies and food for our students, which we plan to, so long as the resource is available, to continue. And so that's helped. I'm sure that you've probably reached out to them, but that's one of our most recent partnerships.
So I think the question is one of, that's just, you've done things, many of us have done things to actually help students address their basic needs. All the insecurities that many of our students face that make them vulnerable, not just in school, but in life. I don't know of a concerted effort to make higher administration more aware and commit more resources. I don't know. Maybe some of you do. As advisors, you see this. As advisors, you probably see this. Is there anybody that can help the group kind of direct us to what is happening, and maybe also talk about what should happen, because we see a lot. Anybody? Okay. So, let me make a promise. I'm going to bring this to my dean. Okay, I'm going to bring this to my dean, and I promise you that. And I'll have a conversation with him because he has sort of framed himself as committed to diversity and inclusion. And so this is the Dean of Biology in LNS, and I'm going to bring this to his attention. Okay? I will do that. And maybe, the new dean in CNR is also an integrative biology faculty member. I'll talk to Mike Botchin and to David Ackerley about this. Okay? And maybe we can get something going here. Maybe we can get something going. And in fact, maybe we can call upon you to participate in creating something, an infrastructure that will help us do more than just these one-off efforts. There needs to be a more concerted effort because I would argue that that basic needs, the conditions are getting more and more severe, the unmet needs. Okay, please.
I want to say that I want to join whatever task force or whatever you end up doing. I work with. Sorry, thank you. I work with students at the dorms. I live in the dorms currently, and they just changed the meal plan to only 12 meals per week. And all of these meal centers are off campus. So most students say they do not have time to actually go to the dining hall.
The choice between eating and studying.
Yeah.
That's the choice, yes.
And so we do need a centralized campus grab-and-go lunch that's part of your meal plan, or something to get food to students where they are, and they're not on the exterior of campus when they need to eat.
Yeah,
so.
What's the message when it's out there, over there? What's the message? Yeah. Other questions? Other comments? Why don't you wait for the microphone? That's okay. Thank you.
I'm curious about your peer advising program. So are they only advising other BSP students, or are they also available to maybe those students that didn't get into the program after their application?
Yeah, is there a bright line between member and non-member?
Yes.
It really depends, because many of our members have friends who did not get into the program, but they're dear friends. They're friends that probably should and could be BSP members. And so it's at the discretion of the advisor, the peer advisor. It's also at the discretion of the study group leader, whether or not the person gets to join, non-member gets to be part of the study group. And so there's no bright line. I mean, these are students that are, many of whom are challenged because of all the reasons we've been discussing, and they're friends.
And I guess my follow-up question is, if you were to scale up and say we want to accept everyone, would that just mean adding another staff member? Or is that I'm just curious, what is your wish list?
So this comes up. If we can only let in 100 students a year, there's need beyond that 100. In fact, I think we did the calculation, and Andrew kind of checked me on this. We're serving about 15% of the biology majors. Is that true? That's a number that comes to mind. Okay, so it's 15%. He speaks with great authority in the absence of him remembering. And so what happens to the other, the other individuals who actually come from similar backgrounds and so on and so forth? One way is to scale up programs, right? Make a bigger and bigger and bigger program, but you can see the problem with that, right? Really what that is, programs are workarounds for what the university is not doing. Understand that? It's kind of like, think about this. Flint, Michigan had a lead problem in the water, okay? First order change is give people bottled water, okay? Well, people get good water now, but the lead problem continues. Second order change would be to stop redlining, to invest more money in infrastructure, to change who's elected to office so they can change policy. BSP is bottled water. BSP is bottled water. That's a workaround for what students who have been marginalized aren't getting in typical classrooms, laboratories, advising sessions. and so on. So we just don't bring in more bottled water to solve the problem. We have to change the university. And this is something that, Mika and I and Missy have been envisioning. We want to create an inclusive excellence resource center where we can help Berkeley and other universities scale up best practices of BSP and other effective programs so that it's not just happening in the program, but it's happening in every classroom, every laboratory, every advising session, and so on. And so the answer is not just a bigger program, because that lets what exists continue to exist. Here.
So then, on that note, I'm curious what you see, what your opinions are as far as what you see are the major current challenges to institutional change.
Okay.
Because I'm sure that's not an easy or simple.
Sure. Well, one problem is that some people think the problem is the problem of underrepresentation, the problem of students from low-income backgrounds not succeeding, is that those students don't belong at Berkeley, that it's an admissions problem. If we'd only admit the right students, we wouldn't have a problem, is the position that some people take. It's about selection rather than treatment. That is, rather than thinking about rethinking our teaching, rethinking our advising, rethinking our mentoring, that it's about just simply selecting better students. And that thinking is there's a lot to that thinking. It's a very dominant culture sort of mindset. I made it, why can't they make it? Okay?
And that's at the highest levels of administration?
No, not. It's patchy. There are some people who believe it and some people who want to buy into that by creating more honors programs and raising the bar for admissions for students to get better students so we wouldn't have these advising issues and these, back home campus kind of disparity issues and those sorts of things. And so there are some people in positions of power who really have that mindset. Solution, choose better students. Rather than change the institution. Changing the institution is glacial, though. It takes a long, long time. And it involves training, resources, support for advisors, for mentors, for instructors. That is a systemic change, and that costs a lot. And I think the problem is that it takes a while to recoup the return on investment, the ROI. It's going to take a while. You won't see immediate returns. And so like politicians with term limits, you do things now, they're going to get immediate returns. Okay? And so by skimming better students and having them graduate, and if they're from underrepresented groups, then you can say, see, Berkeley's done something. And so that is a problem. Please, Tim.
So another approach would be to have the state provide resources all the way from the bottom up as well. That's a long-term approach.
Yeah, wouldn't that be? Right now we get 11% of our operating budget from the state, 11%, and we're a public institution. What's wrong with that moniker? Public institution, 11% of our funding. The rest from development and overhead.
But I mean in high schools and things.
Oh, I agree. Talking about Berkeley, but how much are we investing in infrastructure, educational infrastructure? And that includes, of course, training, support, rewards for changing, moving to make our classrooms and advising sessions and research labs more inclusive and diverse.
And reward structures that support that.
That's right, as in career advancement, promotion, and tenure. Exactly. And Mika, you sit on an advisory group at the National Academy of Sciences. And this is what you're talking about at the Academy.
Yeah, I'm currently serving on a roundtable at the National Academy of Sciences on institutional change for STEM and university levels to increase retention. And there's a lot of discussion about the things that are changing at the at the national level. We have demographic changes that are happening that are really huge, and we also have a lot of technological changes, which is putting pressure on academic institutions because the students are not the same as they have been traditionally. So there's a lot of thinking going on, I think, right now nationally about how to respond to those. You could call them disruptors. You could call them catalysts for change. I think they're more of a catalyst for change, and really restructuring. But one of the things we talk about is, when in organizations, when you have this kind of large transformation, it happens at multiple levels across. But the reward structures definitely have to be consistent with the values that are being perpetuated. So, if as a faculty person, if you're spending a lot of time working with students, underrepresented students, and you're doing a lot of mentorship, and it doesn't count as much as the grants that you're bringing in and the publications that you have. So the reward structures aren't there. And of course, that impacts the faculty who are best at it end up not progressing at the same level. So there's a lot of things that can happen, but that's one of the things. But ultimately, in answer to your question here, money drives the whole thing. Money drives the whole thing. And I think the second thing that drives the whole thing is what we measure as our measurement of success at the institutional level. So right now we measure profit, or how much how much money the university is making. We don't necessarily measure the other things that are equally important, like the well-being of the students and the faculty and the administrators and
the staff.
And the staff.
And the staff.
Yeah, so there's climate surveys and stuff that are being done, but my experience is that we move towards what we measure. So if we don't measure it, it's not going to count. So we have to think about that too.
Faustino.
So it seems to me that the problem is that there's two groups of students who know how to study and succeed because they know how to study, and then students who don't know how to study, and they maybe they want to study and succeed, maybe they don't want to, and the solution would be to get these two groups of students to exchange information on how to study. But then we start getting into differences, and these differences separate us. That's why this information on how to properly study and become successful isn't getting to everyone equally. And that's a big problem. I wouldn't know how to solve that. But it says a lot about us as a society and how these differences that separate us, they arise from other things, like, say, for example, segregation in schools through redlining and different levels of income in families. So this problem we have with students not being able to succeed because they don't have access to resources or the knowledge on how to study is a big problem, and I'm not sure how to fix it, but it's there, and it speaks a lot to us as a society as a whole.
Thank you. So we've got about 10 minutes, and I just want to close. To conclude, what would you like to see next? Is there a next step? I already made a promise about approaching the deans around basic needs and food insecurity. But what would this group like to see next? In terms of a workshop, in terms of some sort of convening, what would you like to see next?
I've talked a lot, sorry.
That's okay.
So I'm wondering, I've noticed there's a lot of I guess maybe patchiness, that we have a lot of I'm from data science, and we have data scholars and biology scholars and alumni scholars, which I didn't know about. And so I'm wondering if maybe there could be a consortium of some type that you could then share some ideas, and we're not all working on the same problem in a vacuum. So
long ago and far away, we had what was called the Coalition for Excellence and Diversity in Math, Science, and Engineering. The Coalition for short. Excellence and Diversity. It consisted of the McNair Scholars Program, It consisted of, there was a PDP, MESA program, the Chem Scholars Program, the Physics Scholars Program, the Biology Scholars Program, and what? Compass. What? Compass in physics. And we would all get together, maybe bi-weekly, and talk about issues, and talk about gaps, and collaborate in terms of outreach and in terms of supporting students. Because of the reorganization that has happened on many different levels, lack of funding and so on, the coalition dissolved. I kept trying, I was chairing the coalition. I kept trying to revitalize it. I would send out invitations, let's get together. But people were dealing with survival. And when you're in a survival mode, you don't want to have another meeting. You need to take care of, stuff at home. And at home was in their program. Okay? Maybe it's time to do this again, to develop a coalition of interested parties, of committed parties to do this work. Because we live in silos. Not by choice, but because we're all so busy. We're overly committed, right? Our plates are very full. And so maybe this is something we can do. So let me explore that. That's my second promise, okay? It's on tape. Other things you'd like to see? Please.
So I'm coming from a perspective of I'm now a GSI for MCB 102, and I've also taken the class as an undergraduate here at Berkeley. And I would like to see a lot more done to rethink the way that we grade and teach. So I went to the GSI training, and the standards for this particular class was a C, either C even or C minus goes to the average student, and then B for great students, and only excellent students, which make up 10% of the class, get A's. And
it's called the curve.
Right. And it's awful because I'm there on the ground with the students, and the first few days we're doing good. Everyone's excited about biology. They're now juniors, but they're like, after the first midterm, they're put into a state of survival, just disoriented kind of, right? And I don't know what to tell them because I don't control anything. We're not given lessons plan or as GSIs, right? And I think a lot of this stems from grading. A lot of the issues that advising, right? It's the standards that the students are graded on. So I would like to see something done about that.
So we need to involve the Center for Teaching and Learning. We also need to take a look at supports and rewards for changing teaching practice, advancing teaching practice. And we need to do all of that. And so that, again, this is something that remains a challenge. Curve grading's been around forever in STEM. And the justification is that we get the best and brightest as a result of the curve. But studies have shown that really talent is wasted. And we're looking offshore now for STEM talent. And that's the Presidential Advisory Committee that's saying we're going to be 1 million STEM workers short in the next 10 years. And we have the talent in our classrooms already, but we're weeding them out. And Hewitt and Seymour did a study that was called Talking About Leaving. And that was leaving STEM. And this idea of competition and curve grading and really competing versus learning the material, this is what you're describing. So it's well documented.
Here's the other side of it. Yeah, the semester started, people would collaborate in discussions, but as the midterms went on, our instructor, our GSI instructor, Kate, she would ask us simple questions. Everyone would know that I had the answer in my head, but then you would get a blank room where no one dares raise their hand. I feel that this comes from a mentality that we don't want to share what we know, because then that would be giving an upper hand to other people in the classroom. And that's toxic. That's not good. And whatever led to this, we should work against it.
I think that grading on curves is just displays faculty ignorance. You know, when you have an opportunity to encourage your students to cooperate and form study groups and all that, their grades should not be based on relative experiences, how another student does. It should be based on what that individual is able to master and demonstrate.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So
and one more thing, you know, we had this culture in Bio 1B. We had all our lab sections that were, we asked the GSI, not we, a previous individual asked the GSIs to grade on an 85% curve. And it took years to get rid of that. And we finally did. But it's possible with just a little bit of enlightenment and pressure to make changes that way.
So this conversation has to happen with evidence, with data. But that's not what always moves the conversation or the decision. A lot of it is belief and sort of the belief of the individual. And there's a strong belief, especially in STEM, but it's the belief in meritocracy. You get what you deserve and you deserve what you get. And if you can't do it, you don't belong. And so, there's so many assumptions behind that. The playing field is level, and so on. Everybody went to the similar sets of high schools, and then it's about aptitude versus achievement. It's all of those things. And so again, it's a very, very steep curve to try and overcome this. Not that it's impossible, and I agree with everything that's been said here.
During the student panel, we had a great tip, which was when working with students to ask them questions to find out what the right resources are for them, to frame it as that, so that they don't receive it as we're trying to weed you out. I said that rather than simply being deliberate when you are working with a student to say, yeah, I'm asking you these questions because I want to find out the right resources to help you succeed,
yes,
rather than saying I'm asking you these questions because I want to see whether you really fit in here or not. That kind of tip is something that I'd like to, the inverted advising that you listed there is, and several other things.
You like that, huh? Inverted advising.
Very close to appreciative advising. I don't know if you guys have heard about appreciative advising or not, but it's been around for, so appreciative advising is based on appreciative inquiry. It's been around for 3 or 4 years now. It has its own annual conferences. It has its own literature. So if you can send me a note and I'll send you some links, or you can just Google appreciative advising. And appreciative advising has 2 different standard rubrics when you're having individual meetings with students. It's like a simple rubric guide, 6 steps as to how you can more effectively do a strengths-based inventory with your student when you're doing the same kind of evaluation that you do right now, but do it in such a way that you focus on appreciating what they bring to the table.
That goes back to your question, Nika.
Right, rather than looking for their deficits.
Got it.
And so the example when we're tutoring on staff on how to do appreciative advising is when someone walks in and you're looking at their transcript and you want to find out why they've got that D in Chem 3A, you don't start off the session by saying, how do we deal with the D in Chem 3A? You start off the session by saying, oh, I see you got an A in Asian American Studies 5. What did you like about Asian American Studies 5? And then they tell you, and then they say, oh, and how did you study for Asian American Studies 5? Oh, and I say, and tell me about the other classes that you did well in. And after 5 minutes of talking about how they did well in the classes they enjoyed, you've provided them with the advice on how to fix Chem 3A.
I see. Interesting. Thank you. One more point, and then we'll bring this to a close.
I have to mention this. As a GSI, I have some DSP students, and I've noticed that the STEM courses are just not facilitating learning for them. And it's really up to the professor to tailor their exams for the students, and they are not given adequate descriptions of what the exam, I mean, I didn't even know what a CCTV was or how I could turn my lectures into such a format, nor was I trained on this. And so as a result, half of my students who are DSP students in my discussion sections actually dropped out. And this is a big issue. So I feel like I don't know what to do. We're not instructed on what to do. And this is a really huge problem.
So we're on record with that. And I want to close on a positive note. I really want to express my appreciation for all of you being here. Thank you very much. We will take your questions and recommendations to heart, and especially the one about me going to the dean, but also about developing a coalition. That can be sustaining beyond a single one-off workshop. So thank you all very much. Thank you.